Welcome to the ESI Africa studio, broadcasting from the East Africa Power Convention in Nairobi. Today I'm speaking with Albert Butare, who is the CEO of African Energy Services. Welcome, Albert. Last night we were at the award ceremony, and for the category of Lifetime Achievement Award, you were announced as the winner. What went through your mind as you were walking up to the stage?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of emotions. When we do what we do, and in this case for me, dealing with energy activities in Rwanda and in the region, you do it for what it is. If it is advising the government on more generation, on more investments, if it's advising the potential investors from out there to come and invest in our region here, you do it as a matter of normal day-to-day responsibility. So really, little did I know that such efforts would be recognized by somebody else. So it was a surprise to me, and positive one though. And also looking at these other 6 people that were competing, they are all fantastic, phenomenal people. And for me to come out like recognized the best, that was also, I felt really humbled, and that gives me courage to keep doing really what I'm doing, to assist in whatever capacity I have in moving the energy initiatives and efforts in my country and in the region.
Well, congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
In the region, and Kenya specifically, as we are in Nairobi this week, the country has received quite a bit of interest from the US Obama's administration's Power Africa initiative. What are your thoughts around that particular initiative?
In fact, you see, when Obama Power Africa initiative was announced, it sent thrills to all of us that we're going to benefit from that, because they are talking quite a sizable amount of money that would assist in different areas of within the energy space. And in essence, it is happening because, for example, it was about 300 million were set aside to assist in connecting about 60 million more people in Africa. And that money will be looking at the increased access, increase the capacity within the beneficiary countries, but also trying to support cross-border interconnections. There was also, for example, $1 billion attached to MCC. These initiatives are all over in our countries. That would assist to financing power projects for the country compacts. And through OPIC and USTDA, there was about 20 million that would assist in project preparations and feasibility studies within the energy space. And there was OPIC, about $1.5 billion for direct financing of the project, but also providing the insurance. There is an EXIM, to which also 5 billion was set aside to support exports to the US for energy. Now, the framework had been set, funds set aside. The problem appearing though, where I know, for example, some companies here in Kenya or even in Rwanda that got this grant and assistance during the feasibility studies, but that's not all. So you find that, from what I understand, for example, when it comes to real project development, then you should be either an American, or your product and services should qualify to be exported to the US, or importing certain facilities, equipment from the US to be able to realize the project. That is one challenge. Challenge number 2, I don't see the much visible presence of the representatives of the initiative in a number of countries, where people will not day to day get advice on what to do in order to benefit this fund. So the initiative and the funds are there, but the effective utilization to bring an impact, I don't see it now. something needs to be done more to be able to make the facility available to be put within easy reach of the countries and the people that need it.
Yesterday at the keynote opening session, a lot of things were discussed. What were the key outcomes from that?
Well, it's always good. Every time I attend these kinds of forums and discussions, there is always something new. You get to understand the status of energy situation in the countries, and more so, you need to learn about the opportunities existing, which opportunities might mean for potential investors to go there and invest, but also probably other neighboring countries, companies may be able to benefit from the opportunities that exist in the countries. So this discussion was rich, I must say, and brought together also potential stakeholders. For example, there was a huge group of potential investors from India that came along with all sorts of different solutions that can be provided. So such services and products are needed here, and these guys they are ready and there to provide. So then essentially what is left is to sit together and agree on how to move. So and then you might have noticed yourself that really people were keen, all high level dignitaries that are involved in the power sector in Kenya, in the region, or even international, they are all here, very attentive, ready to really talk, agree, and partner up. And that is something that is really crucial.
It is fantastic that people are willing to open up and talk with each other about the key issues. So one of the things that is coming out predominantly is hydro in the region. How is this going to impact on the water resources?
Well, let me say that hydro has been the major power resource in the region, was and still is to a good extent. However, we are all realizing that the hydro resources we have in the region are not sufficient to meet the energy demand, which corresponds to the economic growth we are registering in the region. So all the countries, if you have followed, they are trying now to diversify and look for other resources. I can tell, for example, Kenya now is not really talking about hydro. I don't think they have any more reserves on hydro. They are talking of geothermal, which they have in plenty, which they have to kind of work on. And even their targets, the numbers were given 5,000 megawatt, by 2017, is only, they are looking at geothermal. There is, of course, wind, geothermal, and there are also discovered gas. That would be also other sources, and not hydro. When you look at Rwanda, where I come from, we have, for example, exhausted almost all internal resource base. So we're looking at regional projects at the hydro level, but otherwise we're embarking on methane, peat, and geothermal. And Uganda, Tanzania, for example, they have discovered gas, and now it's a priority. That's what they are looking at. They have plenty of it, and other resources are there. They're looking at the geothermal as well, and they also still have hydro resources, but at times due to unfaithful situations from the hydro during the dry spell especially, they are trying to look at these other sources that would work as a baseload provisions. Rwanda, we are looking at methane and peat, for example. Same thing in Burundi, they are looking at peat, for example. They still have internal domestic hydro sources, but I must say that everybody is looking beyond the hydro at the moment.
And that is a very good thing, as we can't always rely on one specific generation technology. And you've been in the power sector for many years. So over the past 5 years, what has really interested you or excited you about the developments?
Let me start with the soft one, and I don't know whether that is soft. 15 to 20 years ago, the countries in the region never took energy to be a priority requirement. So it was never real on top of the agenda. And technocrats, at something we tried very much to convince the people, the government, the heads of state, to realize that energy is a requirement. That time it was like real, well, I don't see it being better than health and education and agriculture. Today, energy has become priority number one in all these countries. And when you have support, motivation from the high-level government authorities, the heads of state, already you are winning a huge portion of the incentives and what drives the investments in the energy sector. One. Number two, Africa, and especially East African region, it's really changing. The landscape is changing. You can see it's really attracting the investment interest from all over. All over. I see people that, for example, my company, what I do is beyond advising the governments in the region, I also advise companies from out there, Asia, Europe, the US, that have interest to have presence in the region. And I can see plenty of them. And the East African region is really providing a lot of opportunities in the resources I just mentioned. You have a lot of gas in Tanzania, you have methane and peat in Rwanda, you have a bit of hydro in Uganda and oil and gas, you have geothermal in Kenya, and you see this is really extremely attractive. So this is what is exciting at the moment. It's like for the coming number of years, we are all going to be kept busy to be able to see how we harness and embark on these resources for the betterment of the countries, for socio-economic development of the countries.
So in terms of advising governments on a regulatory level, what would you say to the various governments in the region?
Yeah, issues like policy and strategies, visions, almost every country has. And legal regulatory system is what is moving on. Some countries advanced are trying legal regulatory system in Kenya, yes. And Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania are trying to catch up as well. The problem there is today, the legal regulatory authorities, for example, the regulators, in some cases, they are not yet there in terms of preparedness and having the ability to provide the guidance, especially to do with the feed-in tariffs, especially renewable feed-in tariffs. That is an issue that is always kind of non-projected, which becomes a challenge to the potential investors, but also to the off-takers as well. And then it becomes tricky because always such feed-in tariffs have impact on the retail tariff. Retail tariff, whether we want it or not, it's still political. In many countries, this has to be decided either by cabinet or even by parliament before you go out, tell people, look, we have increased or reduced the tariff. And this has direct impact to the feed-in tariff or to the investors. So normally, the regulator should have the real capacity to be able to advise the government and to advise the investors, to invite the off-takers on what should be realistic in terms of doing business well, doing business profitably, but at the same time not necessarily killing the consumers in terms of high tariffs. And let me put it this way, there may be resources whose feed-in tariffs are simply high, whether they want it or not. Depends. Even the hydro, for example, I think this is not standard because at times it depends on the landscape of the country where you're going to do the construction of the hydro dam, for example, and where you have the channels and penstocks and all that, and all those add to the value. So that's why you find that the cost per megawatt, for example, in hydro may vary from, let's say, $2 million per megawatt up to 5, sometimes up to 6, depending on those factors and parameters that are involved in the putting up the product.
And that's a very good message to give to the various governments in this region. Well, in terms of investors that want to enter the market in East Africa, what would your message to them be?
Well, as I said before, East Africa is today really emerging as a bloc that really providing all sorts of resources, for their own development, but also attractive to the investors in any space, with energy and other related infrastructure, mining, and so on and so forth. So the only thing is for the governments, for the countries to be prepared to carry out the transaction, to carry out deals without bureaucracy. You heard what was discussed here, that at times to sign the power purchase agreement may take ages because of the existing bureaucracies, but this is in many cases attributed to the capacity we have in the region to be able to deal with, for example, highly advanced companies that are coming from Europe and US, for example, that have dealt with this business for years. So we need to be prepared, we need to be ready to make things work shorter and so on and so forth. For example, Rwanda, which is rated high in terms of investments attraction, in terms of investments environment, this is because you have to take deliberate effort and look, registering a company should not be more than an hour. Can even be done online. Everything to do with investments, right from the registering of the company to getting the utilities and all that stuff, is all done under one roof. So that it becomes efficient and it becomes attractive to the investor. So when it comes now to the next level, where you are negotiating now the project, for example, to agree on the pricing, that's where it's tricky. You need to have highly advanced knowledge on the legal, technical, financial, which help to make transactions go quicker and deals to be realized. That's where we still have a bit of a problem. So, but fortunately, good enough, we are realizing, the countries are realizing and are getting ready to train or to hire people that assist, while in the meantime are trying to build their own capacities to be able to deal with that. So to the investors, opportunities are endless here today. Really, sky's the limit. And to the recipients on this side, it's just to get ready to be able to sell better, to prepare the deals that will be handled in a relatively effective and shorter time.
And we look forward to a future of doing business in East Africa in a much easier way. This is ESI Africa speaking to Albert Butare, who is the Lifetime Achievement Award winner at the East Africa Power Convention 2015. Thank you for watching.